A stereotype is a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image of a type of person or thing. In the United States, our attitude towards drug use is influenced by racist stereotypes about users. Early instances of drug prohibition in American history reveal this pattern. For example, in 1875, the city of San Francisco prohibited Chinese-associated opium dens, believing that white women were morally compromised by taking part in a culturally Chinese lifestyle. Negative attitudes towards smoking opium became widely accepted and ultimately led to negative judgments about people's character if they engaged in such activities. People often assume that policymakers are informed enough to make decisions and enact policy in an objective way. However, people in roles of authority are not immune to the inherent biases and stereotypes in a society. This is problematic when negative stereotypes about people are held by those that are supposed to protect them, which has led to drug laws in the United States that are rooted in racism. This is evident from the rationale revealed in the following quote by Richard Nixon's domestic policy advisor, John Ehrlichman. "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities." The International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Violence defines structural racism as a system in which public policies, institutional practices, cultural representations, and other norms work in various ways to reinforce racial group inequity. It identifies dimensions of our culture that allow the privileges associated with whiteness and disadvantages associated with color to endure and adapt over time. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1988 is a more recent example of racism being enacted through drug laws. The act outlined much higher penalties for the use of crack cocaine compared to the more expensive powder cocaine. Crack was a drug perceived to be used most by poor minority communities in the United States. The logic behind this act perpetuated and rationalized racial profiling in urban areas, perpetuating a cycle of disproportionate criminalization of black people living in those communities. Today, black Americans are still more likely than white Americans to be arrested for drug-related offenses. Black Americans make up 13 to 20% of total drug offenders, yet they make up 43% of people convicted for drug felonies. The disproportionate impact on people of color affects their ability to work and maintain their role as active community members. Although drug-related offenses are often assumed to be violent in nature, this is not usually the case. The stereotype of violent drug offenders helps to mask the disproportionate punishment applied based on race. The impact of the Anti-Drug Abuse Acts of the mid-1980s extended towards the public school systems in the United States. Many public schools adopted a zero-tolerance policy for first-time misbehaviors by students. Kids caught using drugs would be automatically expelled from their school. Students of color were disproportionately affected by the adoption of these policies. For example, black students make up 16% of students enrolled in the public school system, yet make up 36% of those expelled from public schools under the zero-tolerance policy. Many people argue that this creates a school-to-prison pipeline. Treating children like criminals for first-time offenses takes away their right to education, job opportunities, ultimately perpetuating a cycle of oppression. Instead of a policy based on the fear of stereotyped violent drug criminals, harm reduction policies should be the focus when dealing with drug-related issues in our communities. Research indicates that this is objectively the best method for reducing drug-related violence and illness. The stereotypes behind the war on drugs involve class as well as race. The effects on people of color and those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are not mutually exclusive. Intersecting hierarchies of oppression make some people more at risk to the adverse effects of these policies. Therefore, an approach based on science is important when attempting to reduce the impact of our social stereotypes on the way we deal with public policy. It is the only way to reduce harm and change the oppressive nature of these policies.